In a dusty football field on the outskirts of Lagos, a young boy trains long after the sun has gone down. His boots are worn, his jersey is faded, but his dream is clear. He wants to play in Europe. He wants to become the next Didier Drogba or Mohamed Salah. And one day, someone notices him. A man arrives, well-dressed, confident, connected. He watches quietly at first. Then he approaches the boy and his family with an offer that feels too big to refuse. Trials in Europe, exposure to top clubs, a pathway to success. All it requires is a fee, a commitment, a leap of faith. For families already struggling, this moment feels like destiny. Money is gathered, sacrifices are made, opportunities are chased. Because this is not just a dream anymore. It feels real. But this is where the story begins to fracture. Across parts of Africa, this exact scenario plays out again and again. Young athletes are identified, recruited, and promised life-changing opportunities abroad. But many of those promises are never fulfilled. Some players are taken to unfamiliar cities and abandoned. Others never leave their home countries despite payments being made. Some are trapped in unregulated academies with no legal protection. The system is fragmented. There is no consistent oversight, no universal enforcement. And in that gap, exploitation grows. Agents operate without licenses. Academies function without accountability. Contracts, when they exist, are often unclear or unenforceable. What begins as opportunity slowly transforms into vulnerability. Because these are not just athletes. They are minors. They are dreamers. They are individuals with everything to lose. Families who invest everything are left with nothing. Dreams collapse quietly, not in headlines, not on television, but in silence. And the most dangerous part of it all is this. It doesn't look like a crime at first. There are no weapons, no forced entry, no visible violence, just promises, and broken ones at that. But when patterns repeat across countries, across communities, and across years, it stops being coincidence. It becomes a system that feeds on hope, a system that profits from ambition, a system where the dream of football becomes a gateway to exploitation. And by the time the truth is realized, it is often too late. The consequences do not appear all at once. They unfold slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. For every young athlete who is promised a future abroad, there is a family standing behind that dream. Parents who sell belongings, relatives who contribute savings, communities that believe they are witnessing the rise of something extraordinary. In places like Accra and Nairobi, these stories are not rare. They are common, and that is what makes them dangerous. Because repetition creates normalization. When one child leaves, others follow. When one story spreads, it inspires 10 more. But the outcomes are not always shared publicly. Some young athletes never make it to Europe. They remain stuck in transit countries, without contracts, without support, and without a clear path home. Others arrive, only to discover that the promised trials do not exist. No club, no agent, no opportunity, just silence. And in that silence, reality begins to settle in. The money is gone. The connections disappear. The dream dissolves. Families back home begin to ask questions. Calls go unanswered. Updates become vague. Hope turns into anxiety. But the ripple does not stop with individuals. It extends into entire communities. Because every failed story creates doubt. Not just about the agents, not just about the process, but about the dream itself. And yet, the system continues. Unregulated academies recruit more players. Unlicensed agents make more promises. New contracts are signed without legal clarity. Because there is demand, the global football market continues to search for talent across Africa. And where there is demand, there will always be supply, even if that supply is vulnerable, even if that supply is unprotected. For some athletes, the consequences become permanent. Education is interrupted. Career paths are destroyed. Mental health deteriorates under the weight of failure and isolation. And when they return home, if they return at all, They do not come back as heroes. They come back with stories they struggle to explain. Stories of promises that were never real. Stories of systems that were never designed to protect them. Stories that rarely make headlines. Because these are not high-profile scandals. They are quiet collapses. And that is what allows them to continue. Because when exploitation remains hidden, it remains active. As stories began to surface, they did not arrive through official channels. They came from whispers, from former players, from abandoned teenagers, from families searching for answers. At first, these accounts seemed isolated. One failed journey, one broken promise. But as more voices emerged, a pattern began to form. Organizations like Safe Sport International started documenting these cases, collecting testimonies from young athletes across multiple countries. What they found was deeply concerning. This was not random. It was structured. Unlicensed agents operated in open markets, presenting themselves as legitimate intermediaries. They attended local matches, built trust with families, and positioned themselves as gateways to opportunity. In many cases, there was no verification process, no registry, no oversight body enforcing accountability. Investigators began mapping how these operations functioned. Step 1. Identify talent in vulnerable communities. Step 2. Build credibility through promises and connections. Step 3. Request upfront payments for trials, travel, or documentation. And then, disappearance or redirection. Some athletes were moved between countries without proper documentation. Others were placed in informal academies with no clear pathway forward. The system thrived on fragmentation. Different countries, different laws, different enforcement capabilities, which meant one critical thing. Accountability was almost impossible to enforce consistently. Even when victims spoke out, pursuing justice proved difficult. Jurisdiction became a barrier. Evidence was often limited. Contracts, if they existed, lacked legal strength. In some cases, what appeared unethical did not technically violate existing laws. And that gray area became a shield. Investigations also revealed the role of global demand. European clubs and scouts continued searching for emerging talent, often relying on intermediaries to identify prospects across Africa. But not all intermediaries were legitimate. And without strict regulation, the line between scouting and exploitation blurred. Technology began to play a role in uncovering the truth. Digital platforms were proposed to track player movement, verify agents, and ensure transparency in recruitment processes. But implementation remained limited because solving the problem required coordination across borders. And coordination is slow. Meanwhile, the system continued to operate. Because for every exposed case, there were many more hidden. For every documented story, there were countless untold ones. And as investigators pushed deeper, one conclusion became unavoidable. This was not just about a few bad actors. It was about a system that allowed them to exist. A system where opportunity and exploitation coexist side by side. And until that system changes, the cycle continues. For the young athletes caught in the system, the consequences are not theoretical. They are lived, day by day, in unfamiliar places, far from home. Many begin to realize that the promises they trusted were never real. Some find themselves stranded in foreign cities without support. No contracts, no legal protection, no clear path forward, just survival. For a teenager who left everything behind, that reality is devastating. Because returning home is not always an option. There is shame, there is pressure, there is the weight of expectations that were never fulfilled. Families who sacrificed everything now wait for answers. Calls become less frequent. Messages become shorter. Hope slowly turns into silence. And in that silence, consequences deepen. Back home, communities begin to feel the impact. Stories start to circulate, not the hopeful ones that once inspired others, but the hidden ones. Stories of loss, stories of deception, stories of dreams that ended quietly. In cities like Abidjan and Dakar, awareness begins to grow. Parents become more cautious. Young players become more uncertain. But the system does not stop. Because for every story that returns, there are many that never do. And for those still inside the system, the consequences intensify over time. Without proper support, some athletes fall into financial hardship. Others struggle with mental health challenges, dealing with isolation, failure, and uncertainty. A few find alternative paths, but many do not. What makes this moment so critical is not just the suffering itself, but the realization behind it, that the system was never built to protect them. It was built to move talent, quickly, cheaply, efficiently, and when that system fails, it does not collapse entirely. It simply replaces those who fall behind. New players, new dreams, new risks. For organizations like Safe Sport International, this moment represents urgency, because intervention cannot come after the damage is done. It must happen before the first promise is made, before money changes hands, before families commit everything. Because once the journey begins, the consequences are already in motion. And by the time they are fully understood, they are often irreversible. In the end, there is no single moment where the system collapses. No headline that fully captures the damage. No final whistle that signals closure. Because for the young athletes affected, the story does not end cleanly. It lingers in memories, in missed opportunities, in lives that took a different path than expected. Across Africa, awareness is beginning to grow. Organizations, advocates, and safeguarding bodies are pushing for change. Groups like Safe Sport International are calling for stronger regulations, better oversight, and systems designed to protect young athletes before they enter professional pathways. There are discussions about licensing agents, about creating verified recruitment channels, about educating families so they can recognize warning signs before it is too late. Technology is also being introduced as part of the solution. Digital platforms aim to track player movement, verify opportunities, and create transparency in a system that has long operated in the shadows. But progress is slow because the problem is deeply rooted. It exists at the intersection of poverty, ambition, and global demand. Where opportunity is scarce, risk becomes acceptable. Where dreams are powerful, caution is often ignored. And where oversight is weak, exploitation finds space to grow. For many of the athletes who lived through this experience, the lessons come at a high cost. Some return home and rebuild their lives outside of football. Some continue chasing the dream through safer, more structured pathways. And some disappear from the system entirely. Their stories untold, their potential unrealized. But even as individual journeys end, the larger question remains: has anything truly changed? Because while awareness increases, the demand for talent continues. And as long as that demand exists without proper protection, the cycle risks repeating itself. New agents will emerge. New promises will be made. New families will believe. And unless the system is fundamentally restructured, the outcome may remain the same. This is not just a sport story. It is a human story. A story about dreams, about trust, about the cost of opportunity when it is placed in the wrong hands. And in the end, one truth stands above everything else. Not every path to greatness is safe. Not every opportunity is real. And sometimes, the biggest danger is not failure. It is believing in a system that was never designed to protect you.